Imagine your entire future hanging on a single government decision. Not just the next college term, but your research, your job offers, your life's work, and a country's global reputation as a magnet for the brightest minds. This isn't a plot for a sci-fi series, but the harsh new reality for hundreds of thousands of international students in the United States, and especially for those from China. This week, headlines exploded around the world as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stood before reporters and announced what many are calling the most aggressive crackdown on foreign students in decades. Effective immediately, the U.S. would start revoking the visas of some Chinese students, those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party, or even just studying in so-called critical fields. But that was only the beginning. The State Department revealed the suspension of all new visa interviews while it drafts stricter guidelines, including, yes, ramped-up surveillance of students' social media activity. Suddenly, the dreams and investments, not to mention the futures, of nearly 280,000 Chinese students in America are on shaky ground. Why is the world's top destination for international talent turning away the very people who have fueled its innovation boom? What's really driving this sudden pivot? National security, economic anxiety, politics? And most crucially, what does this mean for the future of American education, tech leadership, and even global power itself? Let's dive into the real numbers, stories, and clashing agendas behind the headlines and uncover why this ongoing battle over visas isn't just about students. It's a high-stakes struggle that could redefine the world's superpowers for decades to come. First, some context. For generations, the United States has held an unrivaled position as the dream destination for the world's top students. It's a symbiotic relationship. Universities benefit from diverse perspectives and tuition dollars. Students gain world-class education and career opportunities, and the nation itself reaps the rewards of fresh ideas, entrepreneurship, and long-term global influence. Nowhere is this relationship more pronounced than with China. In the 2023-2024 academic year alone, over 277,000 Chinese students landed at U.S. campuses, making up nearly a quarter of all international enrollees. Financially, the impact is enormous. International students contributed more than $43 billion to the U.S. economy last year, with Chinese students representing a massive share. Walk across the campuses of Harvard, MIT, or Carnegie Mellon, and you'll see just how deep these connections run. At Carnegie Mellon, for example, nearly half, 46.8%, of international students hailed from China in 2023. These aren't just numbers. They're the lifeblood of American research labs, tech incubators, and future startups. Since 2000, more than 50,000 Chinese students have earned STEM PhDs in the U.S., and many of them stayed to build companies now worth a staggering $100 billion as of 2022. For American academia and the broader tech sector, international talent isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. The U.S. produces only a fraction of the skilled workers needed for AI, engineering, and biotech. Foreign students and researchers, especially from China, have filled this gap for years, driving research breakthroughs, tech startups, and even Fortune 500 giants. But now that pipeline is at risk of drying up. The Trump administration, echoing persistent security concerns, has stepped up efforts to limit international student flows. These actions touch the heart of some of America's most hallowed institutions. In a move that shocked educators and business leaders alike, the administration even tried to block Harvard University from enrolling any international students at all, a decision only paused by a federal judge after an outcry from across the globe. What's behind this dramatic escalation? Officially, administration voices like Marco Rubio say it's about protecting national security. The fear: China's government is using students and researchers as a conduit for espionage and intellectual property theft, especially in fields like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biotech, the very domains that could define global power in the 21st century. John Moulinar, a senior member of a Congressional Intelligence Committee, put it bluntly: the Chinese Communist Party has established a systematic pipeline to embed researchers in leading U.S. institutions. But critics argue that these sweeping steps are an overreaction, punishing thousands of innocent students for the actions of a tiny few, or, perhaps, none at all. Mary Gallagher, a leading scholar on U.S.-China relations, warns, the way they're drawing these boundaries is too broad and too undefined. This is damaging not just to U.S.-China educational exchange, but also to U.S. science and technological competitiveness. Emotional stories are pouring in from students caught in the crossfire. There's a growing fear among us, one Chinese graduate student told the press, asking not to be named for safety. We came here to learn and contribute. Now we're treated as threats. And it's not just fear, it's real confusion and chaos. Hundreds of students had visa applications in process or were preparing to renew their status when the State Department abruptly announced the freeze. Within hours, interview appointments were canceled and guidance became unclear. For universities, it was an administrative nightmare. For students, a personal crisis. Miriam Feldblum, co-founder of the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration, described the ripple effects. Pausing visa interviews is disruptive. These students have turned down other places, made plans, committed expenses, all to face this uncertainty. And it doesn't stop there. In a politically charged move, President Trump publicly suggested that Harvard University should cap its international student quota at just 15%. "I want to make sure the foreign students are people that can love our country," he told reporters. The implication was clear. Loyalty tests, ideological litmus, hardly the open, merit-based system that has fueled U.S. scientific dominance for a century. Add to this the administration's previous attempts to deport students involved in pro-Palestine campus protests, and its on-again, off-again legal protections for student visa holders. And it's no wonder that confidence in the U.S. as a welcoming place to study is plummeting. Chris Richardson, a former U.S. consular officer, summed it up with a note of sadness. "There is a big perception among foreign nationals that the United States is not the most welcoming place at this time. Yet in Beijing, the message is very different. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs denounced the visa revocations, calling them unreasonable and ideologically motivated. The U.S. has unreasonably canceled Chinese students' visas under the pretext of ideology and national rights," spokesperson Mao Ning said in a sharply worded statement. Rhetoric on both sides began to spiral, a war of words with real consequences for real people. Why does this matter so much beyond just the individuals and universities involved? Because American universities are facing their own financial cliff. International students pay premium tuition rates, often 2 or 3 times what U.S. residents pay. That $43 billion annual boost keeps research labs humming, scholarships funded, and faculty jobs secure. Universities from MIT to small liberal arts colleges are deeply reliant on this revenue. At the same time, the U.S. is facing a talent shortfall across critical STEM fields. If international students, especially those from China, start to look elsewhere, the entire innovation ecosystem could suffer. Rosie Levine, an expert on international education, warns, "The chilling effect on Chinese students choosing the United States as their preferred place to study will be enormous." It's not just a matter of money or research rankings. Since 2000, tens of thousands of Chinese students stayed in the U.S. after earning their PhDs, starting new companies in Silicon Valley, Boston, and beyond. Those startups, now valued at $100 billion, are central to America's tech edge. If tomorrow's talent heads instead to London, Toronto, or Sydney, the next Google or Moderna could be born far from American soil. And the risks of escalation are real. Policymakers warn that China could retaliate, barring American students from studying in China or limiting research partnerships. That could trigger a global brain drain, fracturing the open flows of knowledge that have defined this century so far. Even some who support tighter scrutiny admit there are downsides. The administration has done this at exactly the wrong time, protecting us from nothing. The vetting process is already significant, says Tom Dretler, an analyst of higher education administration. Universities, advocacy groups, and tech giants are sounding the alarm. The question is, will Washington listen? Amid all this, tens of thousands of students remain in limbo. Some are days away from graduation, others still waiting for word on whether they'll even be allowed to board a plane. Will the U.S. be the center of global education, or close its gates in the name of security? As the dust settles from this week's shock announcements, a larger question looms. Could this crackdown actually backfire, accelerating the rise of America's global academic rivals and undermining the very innovation and influence Washington says it wants to protect? In the next part, we'll investigate just how much America stands to lose if this policy shift continues, and whether a path forward exists that can balance security and openness. But first, what's really motivating this new era of suspicion, and who or what ultimately stands to win? So, what happens next? Let's imagine the ripple effects of this American visa crackdown, not just in the lives of thousands of students, but in the very balance of power in global education, research, and innovation. The risks and opportunities ahead are enormous, and their impact may stretch far beyond today's headlines. First, the immediate future for international students is one of deep uncertainty. On campuses from California to Massachusetts, Chinese students who once felt at home are now quietly asking themselves, when will my visa come up for review? Will I be sent home before I complete my degree? Is my dream of working in the US already over? According to new data, nearly 280,000 Chinese students are currently in the US. That's almost 1 in 4 international students, and they funnel billions into the American economy. Take Carnegie Mellon University, where, astonishingly, almost half of all international students in 2023 came from China. Without them, university budgets buckle. Classroom discussions lose a global dimension. Labs miss out on top talent, sometimes the only person in a department with a unique skill set or research background. But this isn't just about numbers. Recent reports reveal that since the year 2000, over 50,000 Chinese graduates earned PhDs in science, technology, engineering, and math here in America. Many of them stayed, launching startups, inventing game-changing products, even founding companies now worth more than $100 billion combined. If that pipeline dries up, who fills the gap? The answer might be no one, or at best, it's a slow patchwork fix. Universities are scrambling to diversify their international intake, courting students from India, Vietnam, and Africa. But experts like Tom Dretler warn, the administration has done this at exactly the wrong time, protecting us from nothing. The vetting process is already significant. It's a sentiment echoed by Miriam Feldblum, who says the freeze on new visa interviews has created unprecedented confusion, just as students make life-changing decisions about where to study. Now let's look at the broader landscape. What if Chinese students decide the US is simply no longer worth the risk? Europe, Canada, and Australia are ready to roll out the red carpet. Already, universities in Toronto and Melbourne report a surge in Chinese applications. The result? America's historic status as a magnet for global talent could implode, replaced by a new academic axis overseas. And it's not just students. American research relies on international partnerships. With heightened scrutiny, universities are reviewing or even suspending joint projects with Chinese labs. The US government is examining every research grant, every team with a Chinese national, with a magnifying glass, and sometimes a sledgehammer. According to Professor Mary Gallagher, the way they're drawing these boundaries is too broad, too undefined, damaging not just US-China educational exchange, but also America's scientific competitiveness. Retaliation is already in the air. Beijing's Ministry of Education is reportedly weighing restrictions on American students and researchers headed to China. In a chilling echo of the Cold War, the world's 2 largest economies may soon have fewer young leaders who know each other, have shared ideas, or even trust one another at all. So, one scenario is clear. The United States, once the default superpower in academic exchange, risks being sidelined. And with that comes a chilling effect. Rosie Levine warns, the chilling effect on Chinese students choosing the United States as their preferred place to study will be enormous. But what about the national security argument? Lawmakers like John Moulinar insist there's real risk. The Chinese Communist Party has established a systematic pipeline to embed researchers in leading U.S. institutions. Espionage is not a fantasy. U.S. officials point to documented cases, and after all, protecting critical technology is a legitimate state interest. But is this blanket approach the right answer, or does it throw the baby out with the bathwater? Here's another twist: the economy. The $43.8 billion that international students bring each year is not just pocket change. It supports tens of thousands of jobs, from professors and lab technicians to local coffee shop owners. Harvard and other elite universities have warned that even a small drop in Chinese enrollments could spark layoffs, gutting departments and canceling entire programs. And at less wealthy institutions, the impact will be even sharper. If the current course continues, the U.S. may see a tightening feedback loop, where fewer international students choose the U.S., so universities cut programs, which makes the U.S. even less attractive. A surge in Chinese entrepreneurial activity. But in Canada, the EU, or Australia, not in Silicon Valley. A new generation of American and Chinese leaders growing up apart, without the bridges built by years spent studying and struggling together. But not all is lost. This crisis could become a wake-up call, an opportunity for the U.S. to rethink how it attracts the world's best minds, while still safeguarding national security. Experts have suggested more targeted vetting, clearer guidelines, and real investment in academic diplomacy. Can the U.S. find a balance between open doors and necessary scrutiny? Now, stepping back, what does all this mean for you, the viewer? Whether you're a student contemplating international study, a parent, an educator, or just someone invested in the future of American innovation, several lessons emerge. First, understand that global education is an ecosystem. Policy shifts in one country can reshape opportunities, jobs, even the direction of science and technology everywhere. If you or someone you know is considering studying abroad, research not just the quality of programs or rankings, but also the current visa climate and political context. Be prepared for sudden changes and have a backup plan. Second, appreciate just how much innovation depends on diversity. Multinational teams have produced Nobel Prizes, built tech giants, and solved world problems together. If American campuses lose that diversity, the effects may be slow but devastating, a kind of intellectual climate change. Third, recognize the value of resilience and adaptability. For students, this might mean applying to a wider range of countries or pursuing remote research collaborations. For universities, it's a moment to rethink how they support international talent, not just in admissions, but also in advocacy and daily life. For policymakers, the message is clear. National security and global engagement are not mutually exclusive. Precision is key. Examine applicants thoroughly, yes, but don't send a message that all foreigners are threats. The world is watching how America handles this, and reputations, built over decades, can be lost in a few short years. And for all of us, it's a call to stay informed, to cut through the noise, and to remember the stories behind the statistics. These aren't just numbers, they're lives, ambitions, and the very fabric of tomorrow's breakthroughs. So, back to our central question. Will this crackdown on Chinese students weaken America's innovation and global standing, or is it a needed step to protect national interests? The answer is both complicated and urgent. Clearly, the current approach is already causing real-world damage, undermining university budgets, chilling research, and risking America's hard-earned reputation as a global magnet for talent. Yes, national security matters, but when fear drives policy, opportunity suffers. And history shows again and again that closing doors breeds stagnation, not strength. If America wants to stay on top, it must find the courage to innovate not just in labs, but in policy, to lead with confidence, not suspicion. Otherwise, the world's brightest minds and the seeds of the next Silicon Valley may simply take root elsewhere. And here's a secret fact you might not hear on the news. Many of the innovations that shaped America's tech dominance, from rockets to artificial intelligence, were spearheaded by immigrants and international students. Lose them, and you risk losing the future. So, what's your take? Should the U.S. double down on its visa crackdown or build smarter bridges for global talent? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, please like, share, and subscribe, because understanding these big